This documentary was well produced and captures the history of Black Christianity in America with perfection. From the 1800s until today, Louis Gates Jr. takes us on a journey through the ups and downs of the Negro's life here in America. All paths begin within the Christian church in one form or another. Gates interviews some very prominent and intellectual men and women which do an excellent job unpacking the mindset of our people at various seasons of our stay here in America. For these things, I give this documentary a perfect 10. Where I differ with this series has to do with the way most of the speakers characterize the functioning purpose of the Black church. I want to introduce to you a theology that would best describe something that every group of people will engage in when seeking good in the name of God. The term protracted purpose. The New Testament defines the church's protracted purpose in the life and words of Jesus. Protracted purpose has but one goal with many vines. The goal is compliance with the will of God and to avoid condemnation. The many vines has to do with producing righteousness in all of our human relationships. The mission statement of the church's protracted purpose is found in John 3:16 through 18. It reads as follows: For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Verse 17. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Now verse 18. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. These verses speak about what God has done to express his love towards all mankind. It tells us that he gave his only Son as a sacrifice for this world. In other words, Jesus is given to men by God to be executed for the world's sinful nature and tendencies. Next, we can see why God did this. This was done so that mankind could avoid being condemned for their sinful nature. We use faith to embrace the sacrifice of Jesus. We believe that his teachings and his way of life is how men should live. The church's protracted purpose was also modeled by Jesus in the way he organized and approached his daily ministry to a world in trouble and in need. In the time that Jesus ministered, society had all the social artifacts that we have in our current century. And I might add, they were 10 times worse than what we have today. Israel was suppressed as a nation. Abortion was unhinged. Political corruption was dominant. Women were abused. Everyone could not vote. Immigrants were treated poorly. Public preaching would get you executed. There was no freedom of religion, just to name a few. Yet Jesus did not organize the church against the powers that be. He just said, give Caesar his due, give Caesar his tribute. Jesus fed the people because the markets were closed. When it came to the poor or those in need, Jesus said 3 things. The poor you will always have. If you give them food, drink, clothes, visit the sick, provide for the homeless, and visit those in prison, you have done good. It is inferred that we should find ways to do it. For Jesus says to his disciples, what do you have? And they said, we have 2 fish and 5 loaves. There were no governmental programs in that day, even though the people paid their taxes. The way Jesus modeled protracted purpose also demonstrates that the church did not depend on the state to do its ministry. Perhaps the most overlooked fact in scriptures is that Jesus did not preach to the Gentiles. He even told his disciples not to go unto the Gentiles to preach. Instead, Jesus worked on the moral character of the religious. He spent 3 years trying to fix them. It wasn't until Jesus was making his exit that he told the disciples to go unto the uttermost parts of the world and make disciples of men. Not politicians, not businessmen, not millionaires, not a success in the world, but disciples, meaning men disciplined in righteous behavior. This is where the pure intent of God takes form. Men learning to be disciplined in righteous behavior. Protracted purpose deals with shaping the moral character of our sinful world. Those that minister in protracted purpose are to be agents of moral change with the intent of cultivating righteousness back unto God. That is how his church is built upon the rock. And that is why the gates of hell won't prevail against it, because of its moral strength. Satan does not fight prosperity. He seeks to drain out the moral integrity of the wealthy. The unwitting journey of our forefathers began in America as slaves engaged in heaven's protracted purpose of checking the character of so-called righteous men here in America. The slave owners were professed Christians on Sunday, yet their immoral behavior presided Monday through Saturday over their Negro slaves, a Bible in one hand and a whip in the other. They brought us here to profit. God allowed it to judge. During such times, it was well within the limits of the protracted purpose-driven black pastor to shine a light on the misdeeds of white Christianity. However, we have exceeded and redefined this mission as modeled by Jesus in a more similar and lawless time, turning the church into a big tent where sin is now something that is sanctioned among men through protests and legislation. The undisciplined have overcome the disciplined, as Israel did Aaron while Moses was gathering a word from God in the mountain, saying, "Make us a god. We can't wait for Moses any longer." The problem we now face is that black and white Christianity is shining their light for social justice and economic gains, while both are doing very little to advance the reason Jesus built his church. His protracted purpose was to save men from their personal sins, which in turn would correct as much as is possible their public sins. The irony of what the black church is expected to do today to facilitate this immoral unrest in the church is breathtaking when you pair it against the ministry that Jesus modeled. Certain speakers in this documentary have basically asserted that the black church should abandon the protracted purpose of calling out the biblical immoral justices, which are clearly pointed out in the Bible, and do something that Jesus didn't do. That is, engage Caesar for a larger slice of this American pie and let God deal with the sin of men later on, implying that John 3:16 through 18 has expired and we should just get on with living our truths. Finally, a church that doesn't seek the correction of spiritual immorality within this world is not a church. It's a political platform of the religious malformed. For what shall it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose their soul? This is T. Allen Stringer. In all thy getting, get a good understanding.
Coming back like a thief at night. Every knee shall bow and tongue confess that he's Lord.
I'm going home, just to